Alex sat on the couch, staring at his phone, waiting for a reply that never came. Sophia had read his message hours ago, yet there was no response. Lately, this had become a pattern. Her absence, her indifference, the coldness that crept into their conversations. He exhaled sharply, tossing his phone onto the table. Another night alone. Another evening where she was too busy, too distracted. It wasn't always like this. There was a time when they laughed at stupid jokes, stayed up late talking about nothing, and held onto each other like they'd never let go. But now it felt like he was holding on to something that had already slipped away. The front door opened, and Sophia walked in, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. She barely looked at him as she set her bag down. "Hey," she said flatly, scrolling through her phone. "That's it?" Alex asked, his voice tight. "Hey," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "I had a long day, Alex. Can we not do this tonight?" "Do what?" He leaned forward. "Talk. Acknowledge that we haven't had a real conversation in weeks." She looked up then, irritation flashing across her face. "I'm tired. Not everything has to be a fight. Maybe if you actually cared, we wouldn't be fighting." The words slipped out before he could stop them, and instantly, her expression hardened. "Of course I care," she shot back. "But I also have a life outside of this relationship. You act like I'm supposed to just sit around waiting on you." Alex clenched his jaw. It wasn't about waiting, it was about feeling like he didn't matter anymore. He used to be her priority, the person she turned to. Now, he was an afterthought. "I'm done with this conversation," she muttered, grabbing a water bottle and heading toward the bedroom. And just like that, she was gone. Again. Frustration boiled in his chest. He ran a hand through his hair, breathing deeply. How had they gotten here? Was this just a rough patch, or were they past saving? He grabbed his jacket. He couldn't sit in this silence anymore. He needed air, space, something to clear his head before he said something he couldn't take back. The city lights blurred as he walked aimlessly through the streets, hands shoved into his pockets. He didn't know where he was going, only that he couldn't go back home, not yet. His heart felt heavy, his mind cluttered with questions he didn't have answers to. Somewhere along the way, he had convinced himself that love was enough to hold them together. That if he just tried harder, waited longer, things would go back to the way they were. But standing here, lost in the middle of the night, he wasn't so sure anymore. Alex found himself in a quiet part of town, away from the noise and the tension that had been weighing him down. The glow of a small cafe caught his eye, warm light spilling onto the sidewalk, the low hum of jazz drifting through the open door. Without thinking, he stepped inside. The place was nearly empty. Just a few late-night stragglers, lost in their own worlds. He ordered a coffee and sank into a corner booth, rubbing his temples. He wasn't sure why he was here. Maybe he just needed a place where no one expected anything from him. "Rough night." The voice was smooth, rich with quiet confidence. He looked up. Across from him, a woman sat alone, stirring her tea. She was older than him, maybe late 30s, early 40s, but effortlessly elegant. Dark eyes, a knowing smile, she had the kind of presence that made people take notice. He let out a short laugh. "Something like that." She nodded, as if she understood more than he was saying. "Love problems." Alex hesitated, then shrugged. "You could say that." "Let me guess," she said, leaning slightly forward. "You feel like you're giving everything, but somehow, it's never enough." His chest tightened. How did she know? She smiled, sensing his reaction. "I've been there," she admitted. You start questioning if you're the problem, if you're asking for too much. But deep down, you know you're just asking for what should already be there. Alex swallowed, her words hitting too close. "Yeah, exactly." She took a sip of her tea, studying him. "And yet you're here. Not home, not fighting. Just here." "I needed space. Or maybe," she said gently, "you needed to feel something different." For the first time that night, Alex exhaled, some of the weight lifting from his chest. He wasn't sure why, but talking to her felt easy. There were no accusations, no exhaustion, just conversation. "I'm Elena, by the way." "Alex." She gave a small smile. "Nice to meet you, Alex." They talked, And for the first time in weeks, he wasn't thinking about unread messages or silent treatments. She had this way of making everything seem simple, like she had already lived through the kind of heartache he was drowning in. "You deserve to be appreciated," she said at one point, her gaze steady. "Not as an option, not as an afterthought. Someone who truly cares will make you feel that. Always." Alex held her gaze. It was a simple statement, but it left a strange feeling in his chest, something dangerously close to longing. A part of him wanted to say goodbye, to walk away before this turned into something it shouldn't. But another part, the part that was tired of waiting to be noticed, stayed exactly where he was. Time slipped away as they talked, the outside world fading into the background. Alex hadn't felt this present in a long time. There was no tension, no feeling of walking on eggshells. With Elena, everything felt effortless. She glanced at her watch and smiled. "It's late. Walk with me?" Alex hesitated, but only for a second. He wasn't ready for the night to end. They stepped out onto the quiet street, the cool air settling around them. "So, tell me," Elena said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "What do you really want, Alex?" He let out a slow breath. "To be happy? That's vague," she teased. He smirked, but the weight of the question still lingered. "I just want to feel like I matter. Like I'm not constantly chasing after someone who barely notices I'm there." She nodded as if she had heard the same story 100 times before. "You shouldn't have to beg for someone's attention. Love isn't supposed to be exhausting." He turned to her, searching her face. "And what about you? What do you want?" Elena's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. "I stopped waiting for love a long time ago. Now I just enjoy the moments that feel right." They walked in silence for a while, the conversation settling between them. A soft breeze stirred the air, and without thinking, their hands brushed. Neither pulled away. Alex swallowed, his pulse unsteady. There was something intoxicating about the way she carried herself, like she had nothing to prove, nothing to beg for. The contrast to Sophia was impossible to ignore. "You're overthinking," she murmured, amusement flickering in her eyes. He chuckled nervously. "Maybe." Elena stopped walking, turning to face him. The streetlights cast a warm glow around them, making the moment feel unreal. She reached up, her fingertips barely grazing the edge of his jaw. "Sometimes you don't need to think. You just need to feel." His breath caught. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, to remind himself that he was still in a relationship. But the truth was, he hadn't felt this wanted in a long time. Before he could talk himself out of it, she leaned in, her lips barely a whisper away from his. For a fleeting second, he hesitated. Then he closed the distance. The kiss was slow, deliberate, nothing rushed, nothing reckless. But as soon as it happened, reality crashed back. Alex pulled away, his heart pounding. I shouldn't have done that," he said, guilt settling deep in his chest. Elena simply smiled, unfazed. "But you did." He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head. "I have a girlfriend." "Do you?" she asked softly. "Because it doesn't seem like you feel that way anymore." The words hit harder than he expected. He wasn't sure what hurt more, the kiss itself or the fact that she might be right. Alex sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor. The weight of what he had done settled heavily on his chest. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, Sophia's name glowing on the screen. He had barely spoken to her since last night, and now there was no avoiding it. He answered, his voice strained.
"Hey."
"Hey," she said, her tone cautious. "You okay? You've been distant." He swallowed hard. There was no easy way to say it. "We need to talk." A pause. Then, quietly, "What happened?" She was waiting in the living room when he walked out, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He sat across from her, his hands clasped together. "I messed up." Sophia's body stiffened. "Messed up how?" He exhaled sharply. "I met someone last night. We talked. It was nothing at first, but then I kissed her." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Her face didn't change right away, but he saw it. The flicker of pain, the way she swallowed hard like she was forcing herself to stay composed. You kissed her. Her voice was flat, but he knew her well enough to hear the hurt beneath it. I didn't plan for it to happen, he said quickly. I was frustrated, I felt alone. And she… Sophia held up a hand, stopping him. Don't. I don't need to hear about her. Regret clawed at his chest. Sophia, Why are you telling me this? She interrupted, her voice shaking now. Are you trying to be honest, or do you just want to ease your guilt? That hit deep, because he wasn't sure. Maybe both. I didn't mean to hurt you. She laughed bitterly. But you did. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away. You know, I've been trying. I know I've been distant, and I know things haven't been perfect, but I thought we were still fighting for this. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. I guess I was wrong. Alex's throat tightened. I don't want to lose you. She stared at him for a long moment, searching for something in his face. Whatever it was, she didn't find it. You already have. A lump formed in his throat as she stood, grabbing her keys. I need space. He wanted to stop her, to say something that would fix it, but there was nothing left to say. As the door closed behind her, a hollow emptiness settled in his chest. He had spent so much time feeling neglected, but now he realized he had been so focused on what he wasn't getting that he never stopped to see what he was about to lose. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some betrayals leave scars too deep to heal. And sometimes, by the time you realize what really mattered, it's already too late.